So as I sink further and further into the ground here, we are in the remnants of Grant's Canal outside Vicksburg. Now, as the Union Army slowly progresses south, the last vestige of Confederate resistance on the Mississippi River is at Vicksburg. Take us through what this canal is, what the attempts were to construct it, and why it matters for the war in the West.
With the flow of the Mississippi, it curves over Vicksburg and comes around it. All Vicksburg needs to do is, with taking advantage of the heights of the city at 300 feet above the river, is put guns across that western slope, and as soon as boats come around that bend, they command it and defend against it. So we're going to bypass that, at least with this plan, by going south of that and leaving the whole of DeSoto Point out of the picture and build a canal across, undercutting the entire point, so that all types of craft, the largest and smallest on the Mississippi, can come through and stay out of range of Vicksburg guns.
So there are multiple attempts to construct a canal here.
Three.
And you're involved with the third?
I'm directly involved.
Directly involved.
Because I've ordered the first. The first happens to come under Confederate fire. They place guns where they have the range on it, and they harass so hard that the crews won't be working. The second attempt is Mother Nature's attempt to take it down, because the sides of the canal aren't reinforced. The ground is waterlogged, so that all of our efforts just create more of a slog out of it, and it's like a pigsty.
Now, there's two things that I think are very interesting and important to understanding the significance of the canal here. The first is that more than 1,200 freed slaves were involved in the construction of this canal.
Yes. Using the freedmen for the labor was a byproduct of everywhere the Army's been marching as we leave Tennessee. Every plantation we come past, there are the workers there who are following the Army, dropping their business and leaving their owners. And now they're freed. So what do we do with all these freed slaves? And we can't feed them, we can't clothe them, so we have to give them something to do while we're coming up with that. And small camps are starting to be built, so the men in those camps then need something to do. So they're employed as laborers, whereas then the Army can do business of the soldiers without having to do business of engineers.
And I think one of the other interesting things is that Lincoln personally supports this particular measure. It's interesting to keep going back to that idea of the Westerners seeing the significance of canals and rivers and all that river traffic, and it's interesting to note the connection between the Westerners, Grant, and the Western officers out here, and Lincoln's mentality.
Well, Lincoln grows up on the river. I'm a river child. The Ohio River is not far from where I grow up. So we all have seen the rivers used the way, if you grow up alongside a railroad, you understand that's how you get about. So all of us in the West, it's a natural way to get around for us. That it's a natural then progression of the war. So Lincoln, had he been an Easterner, may not have appreciated it, because certainly the papers in the East don't appreciate it. They say that we're stalling. They don't want to follow that it takes time to do these things. And I think one of the wisest choices here was it gave the men something to do, because if they're idle, they're bound to get in trouble. So the work goes on because that gives everybody else an idea that the Army's doing something, and allows me time to think or look over maps and strategize.
So we know that this canal is not completed, water's overrun it, and it's ultimately not part of the plan to take Vicksburg. So what are the next steps here, particularly for the Navy?
The Navy's going to be our provider of cover, as well as our supplier, and they're bringing the Army down. One corps is already in the area. Second corps is being further built up under McClernand, and Sherman's corps is going to be joining us as well. So we can't all pack in to DeSoto Point. That we're going to have to move down the Louisiana side of the river and find a crossing below. But in the meantime, the gunboats can harass Vicksburg and keep Pemberton off base as far as what our intentions are. I want him to think that we're trying to get at it from the north. And you can see from the Yazoo Pass, that's where Sherman goes to demonstrate against it from the north. So it's going to force Pemberton to move troops that direction and leave the city somewhat unguarded, because he also believes we're going to come directly underneath it. And we're going to land far below. And as you see, once we cross below by Bruinsburg and hard times, how the situation changes.
I will attempt to get out of this mud.
We won't get anywhere.
In a couple seconds. Well, we've wandered a bit into the Mississippi Bayou to find the original landing site at Grand Gulf here on the eastern side of the Mississippi. Now take us through how this is a significant point for the Vicksburg campaign.
I've established myself on the same side of the river as the rebels. We begin bringing the army across. The first regiment that crossed, it was the trepidation of wondering what they would encounter, because there's no artillery here to support them as they come.
And this is significantly further south than the canal.
40 miles south of the city, yes.
Wow.
And it was important because of the terrain between here and the city to get under it. And now we're going to go east of here, but I need the rest of the army to come through and establish itself on this side.
And what's the terrain like here?
It's obviously swampy. The river ebbs and flows such that it seasonally, with rains and whatnot, it will rise and fall here. So today this could be as it is. Next week we could be under 6 feet of water here. And that's the thing with bringing the boats in. It's not going to be a permanent landing site. It's permanent so long as we need the army to come through, and then we abandon that.
So it's just to get the army across.
Provisional, yeah. It's the first stepping stone on the same side. So the jump off from the canal side, Bruinsburg, and hard times on the other side are the staging area to land here. And now it's a question of being on the same side. Do I go north through the rolling hills and fight them on ridges, or do I go around that with the added goal, the more important goal of cutting off the rail supplies at Jackson, which supplies Vicksburg? And if I don't cut that off, it's very probable that Johnston is going to train his men on the rails from Jackson and bring them to Vicksburg to reinforce, and coming up through, withering away my army as he reinforces is not sound.
Now a lot of effort in this theater is being spent.
And not just by us. It's learned that in the months after the war, we learned that one of the reasons Lee pushed back into a second northern invasion was the hope that Lincoln would order us off of Vicksburg to protect the capital with the threat of Lee in Pennsylvania. So all of the Confederacy understands the importance of what Davis himself calls the Gibraltar of the West.
So now where do we move from here?
Well, now that we're here, we have to get out to the Raymond Road, because that is the main venue that will take us to Jackson. And Jackson is the strategic point that we, like Corinth was earlier, a railhead. We have to subdue that and control that and eliminate that as a rail supply option for the Confederates in Vicksburg itself.
So any other insights for Grand Gulf?
Other than the horrible humidity and the snakes.
And you got your horse somewhere around here, right?
I'm waiting for it to get across at that time. We didn't have horses when we landed. And it's not far from here, while we're on the subject of horses, that the Davis plantation, Joe Davis, the brother of Jeff Davis, a horse is captured by some of the staff, and it's unruly and untrainable, and they bring it in. And they know, or at least they think it can be trained by me. And this thing is kicking and screaming, and I get the animal under control. And when they tell me it came from the Davis plantation, that settles the fact that I'm going to buy it as captured property from the government, and I'm going to name it Jeff Davis.
Jeff Davis. Well, back to the big picture. We're moving across the river, moving into Mississippi, and we're eventually going to assault the Gibraltar of the West.
We are definitely on the road to do that now that the Army's on this side, absolutely. And we will get out to Port Gibson, where the road junction is that will take us to Raymond, and McPherson's Corps was out in the front there and probing, because Sherman's not here. Sherman's still demonstrating north of Vicksburg on the Yazoo and the Chickasaw Bluffs in that region, so that McClernand's Corps is going to come across. Now when Sherman, I want to just say this too, when Sherman comes across here, we're already out towards the Raymond Road, and he sends a courier out and tells me to stop moving, kind of barking at that. Stop moving, we need to catch up. And I send back that no need for that, you'll catch up on your own, and only thing you need to bring across is, number one, is bacon, and then ammunition, and then coffee and sugar. And I tell them the rest of the rations will be acquired as we go through the farm country here. And not only the rations are acquired, but the transport. We buy the horses, we buy the wheeled vehicles to take everything. And that's a very strong thing here with the economy shuttered as it is, that the Mississippi folks are happy to take federal gold. along the way. So we're not stripping them of their belongings. We're fair enough to leave them 10 days food supply from each source, and we take the rest from there so that the families can sustain until things improve.
Very good. All right, so that's another one of our episodes on how the war was won in the West, and next we'll be on to
Raymond.
At Grand Gulf. Did I say Grand or Grant?
It's Grand Gulf. Well, it's
Okay,
Grand
okay.
Gulf now.
I'm gonna start over again.
The outtake reel is going to be great.